tuning in for the 4 o'clock news and politics hour this Tuesday. We appreciate your checking in for the latest in politics down inside DC as we do every Tuesday. Check in with Jennifer Lawless at American University. Jennifer, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
We are well here in Providence. Glad to have you, as always, here to give us the skinny as to what's taking place down there. Want to start with the Mueller investigation. We saw last week the indictment of 13 Russian individuals. Now the latest, this Van der Zwaan lawyer, this Dutch lawyer with ties to the Ukraine, and lying about Rick Gates. What's the talk about this?
I mean, the main issue here is that it demonstrates that Mueller is willing to expand the scope of the investigation beyond what a lot of people initially thought. And so this is a situation where he's now indicting somebody for lying about a conversation with Rick Gates, who was not that primary a player, right? I mean, he was obviously one of the people that was indicted, but it's not a name that we knew like Paul Manafort or Michael Flynn or any of these others. And so what that suggests is that the scope of the investigation is going beyond just Russians. It's also filtering into other business dealings and other foreign nationals. In this case, it had to do with discussions regarding the Ukraine. So I think it sends a clear signal to anybody that has lied to the Mueller investigators about anything that they will be charged with perjury. And so more important than the substance of the indictment, I think, is the signal it sends about not playing around. He's serious, and if you lie, he's going to hold you accountable.
And because it is extending so far, do we have a sense maybe of a protracted time frame then if he is digging so deep, that being Mueller?
Well, I mean, the thing that's tricky about the Mueller investigation is that nothing seems to leak from it. And so we don't really know the order in which he has proceeded down these various paths. We don't know if there are simultaneous tracks going on at the same time. So it's hard to say. I mean, all things point to getting closer and closer to Donald Trump. But we've been saying that now for several months, and there are these little bits and pieces that we don't necessarily expect, and we then read the tea leaves. So my sense is that this can't go on forever. It is going to wind down soon, but I don't know that these most recent indictments are indicative of the winding down.
And let's talk a little bit, let's talk to Russia, let's talk maybe about the bots that we keep hearing about and the bot farms pertaining to the elections, but there seems to be a concern for a perpetuation of their involvement just in social media in general, with things taking place here in the country, whether it's the recent shooting in Florida. Can there be any way to actually crack down on this?
Well, I mean, this is what the big debate in Washington is about right now, because you've got almost all members of Congress and Justice Department officials acknowledging that Russians intervened in the election, not necessarily shaped the outcome. That would be impossible to know. Donald Trump is pretty much the only person who has not acknowledged that. But they intervened in the election not only to help Donald Trump, but to sow discord, because after Trump was elected, they also started to get involved and, basically generate drama regarding Black Lives Matter, regarding school shootings. And so what they want to do is upset the equilibrium. They want to make sure that there's constant conflict, constant pandemonium, and that Democrats and Republicans are not on board regarding anything. And if we look at the last year or so in Washington, they seem to have been widely successful. So the big debate now becomes, what do we do about that? And if you have a president that's not taking that seriously and not taking the notion that outside forces are trying to intervene in our domestic politics seriously, simply because you feel that doing so would suggest that you didn't rightfully win your election, then you're really opening the door not only for 2018 and 2020, but for all of these public policy debates to be influenced by people that really have no business influencing them.
Do we think, politically aside, could there be any conceivable way? Could a Facebook, could a Twitter verify these types of accounts, or is this just the new Wild West in which we live?
I think it's the new Wild West, and frankly, it's not clear that there's anything necessarily illegal about these activities. So yes, like hacking into voter software certainly would be, but sort of sowing the seeds of discontent on Facebook might not be. It becomes a little bit tricky, and if you don't have the government on board and behind the general sense of what's okay and what's not okay, it becomes a lot harder to determine how to stop it.
So let's tack to the recent news. Of course, it's the headlines still, the recent shooting in Florida. Of course, we've seen the dialogue that we've seen after every school shooting in recent months. That is the thoughts and prayers debate, the non-action on the Hill. But now we're seeing the students potentially, again, doing walking out or rallies. Is this different? I mean, can the students have any impact?
I would like to think that they can. I mean, what is totally different here is that because it was a high school and not an elementary school, not only do you have students very vocally calling for gun control reform and doing it in an incredibly compelling way, but you also have actual video footage taken by several of these kids while they were hiding in the classroom. And so for a lot of viewers, for the first time, they're seeing what's really going on from the perspective of a high school student. And it's not necessarily that members of Congress are going to be more touched by that than they've been regarding other footage, but it's that constituents might be more likely to mobilize and contact their members of Congress because these young people are affecting them in a way that, you know, some other school shootings unfortunately haven't had the power to do. Now, what I would say is that to the extent that these young people stay motivated, it could matter for 2018. In some ways, it even parallels women following the 2016 election. They've remained motivated and they're going to matter for 2018. If Donald Trump doesn't really pay attention, or if members of Congress only pay lip service, or if this march on March 24th doesn't amount to something monumental, I worry that it's going to seem defeating. And as a result, they might not have the wherewithal to continue because they've been through such a traumatic experience themselves.
So a couple of questions before we tack. It does sort of segue, I think, to the Mitch McConnell comments that he made over the weekend to the New York Times. Leader of the Republican Party being pessimistic about 18.
Right. So the cynic in me says, well, this is all just about the expectations game. And he thinks there's a decent chance they'll hold on to the Senate and maybe they'll only lose the House by 1 or 2 seats, maybe not. And he's trying to set a low bar so it'll look like a major Republican victory in a year where all of the cards were stacked against them. That's the cynic in me. The realist in me thinks the Democrats really, if they can't win now, have no business winning ever. And I think that Mitch McConnell is becoming well aware of that, too. It's not only that we've had a do-nothing Congress, but we've had a do-nothing Congress that's vocally supported Donald Trump or been complicit in some of the things that he said that fly in the face of what the American people believe. And this isn't only about gun control. It's not only about the Russia investigation. It's also about immigration, and it's about health care reform, and it's about infrastructure, and it's about taxes. And at some point, I think that the Republicans are becoming aware of the fact that he might actually be a little bit of a drag on the ticket.
So about the students mobilizing in response to Florida, there's a call for national action. Do you envision seeing this? Do you envision seeing students in California and Illinois on these dates identified? I know I've seen one in March and one in April. Do you anticipate that there will be a nationwide action on this?
I do. I think a lot of it is going to be left up to the students, but if anybody can mobilize on social media, it's the students. This is the only way that they've ever known how to communicate, so it's not sort of out of their comfort zone. The thing that becomes a little bit tricky about it, though, is that these are all people that have very little political experience and don't really know how to protest or rally or stage any kind of these events. And so that's not to say they can't be but it is to say, and Republican members of Congress who are far more inclined to say, look, this is all about mental health. This has nothing to do with gun control. So, I mean, I support their efforts 100%, and I think that we're going to see quite a bit of activism and enthusiasm, but I'm not sure it's going to be sort of as polished as we might be accustomed.
And finally, speaking of students, some of the big news this week, you're going to be departing American University for the University of Virginia. Now, you had 2 hats at American. You were the head of the Women in Politics Institute and professor of politics. Tell us a little bit about your new role at UVA.
Well, so first I should note, a few weeks ago when I sort of called or Skyped in from UVA, I was interviewing. But you guys were so important that I actually worked into the schedule a break during the 2-day interview so that I could still talk to you. Yeah, so it's an amazing political science department, and they have great people who are working on cutting edge questions. It's one of the few universities, like American University, that really values applied politics and wants to ensure that they're delivering a message not only to other academics, but to the broader community. And at this point, it'll just be one hat, which will be nice. I'll continue to do all of my research regarding women in politics, but I won't have to run an institute, at least at the beginning, and we'll see what happens once I'm situated.
And the start date at UVA is?
I will be teaching there in the fall semester, but I'll still be at American until the end of August. So life will not seem like it's changing for a while.
Well, very good. Well, we always appreciate your taking the time to Skype into us here to give us the insights down inside the Beltway. Jennifer Lawless, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer Lawless down at American University, heading to UVA, Skypes in most every Tuesday to give us what's going on down inside DC. Talked about a myriad issues today. What's the latest in the Mueller investigation, the influence of the Russian bots that have been under investigation, and of course, what's next following Florida. So appreciate Jennifer Skyping in. We'll talk with her next week. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center with our next guest.